look like it's working. So just real quick from a show of hands, who like really never works with Shiny? Okay, and then who has, you know, intermediate to moderate Shiny experience? All right, and then maybe expert level Shiny, anyone?
I wouldn't say expert, but...
All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, this is my presentation. Build a Shiny app demo, impressing hiring teams with R and Shiny. Just a little bit about what I plan to cover, just a short about me, and then a Shiny overview, how to fork and clone a GitHub repo using the RStudio IDE, how to edit a Shiny demo app, how to deploy the app, and then some resources. So about me. Let's see. I started my career in financial modeling. I am not an accountant, but I was working for an accounting firm. And at the time, I was really using a lot of Excel and Access. And the way that we were using both of those tools, primarily Excel, was really at its like full potential. By the time I started learning SQL, probably towards the later years of EY or maybe when I started working at PG&E, I'd say that I was starting to get comfortable you know, extracting data and manipulating data with some light SQL. It was several years later, I quit my job at KPMG in, let's see, 2017, and then I met Pablo at grad school here at UCI. That was in between my KPMG and Centene experience, and that's where I really picked up R. For me personally, having kind of struggled through Excel and Access and SQL and understanding its limitations for modeling and for reproducible work, I feel like moving towards something like R or Python felt very natural, especially R, because of its kind of functional programming style. It really wasn't until like my last month when I was in grad school that I learned about Shiny. And that kind of just changed my whole perspective on what could be done with at least communicating data insights. And right now, the last few years between Bloomreach and Centene, I left Centene after 2 years, went to Bloomreach for a year. They're a startup in the e-commerce space. But I did miss sort of the more data science-y type problems that I was working on at Centene. And so I went back to Centene. This time I'm in their central data science organization, and I'm a lead there. So the Shiny demo as a resume accessory. There's a gentleman named Travis Gerke. He had a presentation over the summer at the RStudio Conf where he referred to my Shiny app demo that he had heard of as a resume or cover letter accessory. So that was kind of the motivation for me getting my GitHub repo into order and making it a bit more presentable and creating kind of this, you know, presentation. Some things that really, I think for someone that has never seen Shiny before, and they are familiar to dashboards, whether it be in Excel or MicroStrategy or Power BI or Tableau, is that a lot of these tools inherently feel clunky. And I know with all of them, you can make really beautiful visualizations, like all of them. Even Excel, you can actually make some beautiful looking stuff. Tableau, I mean, there's people that are making posters in Tableau, like geospatial type posters. They're beautiful things. But when you look at a fully functioning, you know, app where you want to have the user engage and interact with it, where they're selecting inputs and then seeing real-time updates to your data, and then the data is being communicated in visuals, I think that's where Shiny really, you know, shines, because you're able to get just a lot of performance. And nowadays, from an aesthetic perspective, out of the box, there are, you know, Shiny extension packages that make just a baseline Shiny app look extremely professional, like very enterprise grade. So yeah, what I plan to show you today is this app. This is the live app, so this is what, you know, anyone can navigate to and visit. And it's fairly basic in terms of Shiny. I mean, I'm using the bslib extension package. It just introduces a few different ways of styling the app. You're able to kind of, I've got a conditional for this output, so I can make a selection here. Let's say I select the European range. It changes from kind of a global faceted view by region to that specific region. You can create visuals like geospatial type visuals. This is using the leaflet package, and this is just simulating 40 different lat-long pairs. Reports. This is just, again, an example of how fast you can render this data. And this is all real-time on a really, this is not a fancy server that this is sitting on. I'm using the Shiny Apps free tier. This is the DT package, and that's like a very popular JavaScript library. And then just an About Me page. So when I was interviewing with Bloomreach, during the initial interviews, they were really excited about something like this because they had never heard of it before. And so it kind of made me think, oh, I should put together a Shiny app so this team understands what's possible with R and what's possible with Shiny. I don't want to say I got the job because of the app, but like everyone there was super impressed. And when I joined them, like multiple people reached out being like, oh, that app made its way around half the company, like it was beautiful, congrats. So it was exciting to kind of see the excitement around the app. So Shiny. Shiny at large is an R package. It provides sort of a web framework that you use which you can use the R language with, where you've got just like every other major web framework, a UI layer and kind of like a server layer. You've got the user or the client. They're sending requests to a server. They're making selections on the UI, so what we're actually seeing, what we're interacting with. They're making selections. They're seeing renderings that are happening in the server. So calculations and computations are happening in the server. That input is getting fed back into the UI as a plot output. And so I think traditionally when you're programming with R or you're doing some type of data science work, it's often that you're going like top to down, like here's a script, or even if it's sourcing a bunch of different scripts, it's, you're in this pattern of like, oh, this is the start, this is the finish. With Shiny, what I really like about it, I think it's important to view it more of like an electrical circuit. Like the whole thing is kind of interacting together at once. And if you get in the habit of thinking about Shiny in kind of this circular motion, you can do a lot of really cool things with interactivity. And then yeah, like the bslib package that I'm using for the Shiny app demo. It's relying on the bslib package. That introduces Sass variables to more easily style like the bootstrap theme for Shiny. And so in addition to just using kind of a canned solution like that, which I'm using there, you can also further extend the Shiny app aesthetics using a combination of CSS or Sass CSS or different JavaScript widgets or actions. And so it's pretty incredible what you could do just with Shiny. There's a few different ways to package a Shiny web app. This is kind of your traditional, let's call it app.r, but there's really three major components to a Shiny app. You load packages or data, you define the UI objects, and then you create the server function. So again, the UI layer is where you're creating inputs that the user is going to be interacting with. You're also going to be defining where certain visuals will be placed. The server it takes in two functions, your inputs and then the outputs. So this is where you are taking the inputs from the UI and reactivity or different computations are happening, and then you're assigning a lot of different outputs to the output object. And then again, it's kind of like a circular motion. This is just kind of an extension of that. Like, you can create a whole working functional app in an app.r. And again, like this right here, if you were to run it, it would run. You're loading the package at the top, you're defining the UI here in this blue section. In the green section, we are creating the server function, and you can see that, and I'll get into it in a bit, but this slider input is the input that the user is going to be interacting with, and the name of that input ID is bins. So down here, when we are creating this histogram that is being saved as output dist plot, and then again we're sort of displaying that here as plot output ID dist plot. It's in this breaks where changing that input, the bins, will have an impact on the histogram. And this is a fully functioning kind of like demo app that's on the Posit or RStudio Shiny page. I think it's still shiny.rstudio.com, but it'll probably be updated soon. A more sort of refined approach to setting up a Shiny app is using kind of a modular framework. Shiny is smart enough to know that if you have the global.r, UI.r, and server.r in your project's root path, that you're working with a Shiny app, and that these three files work in conjunction with each other. The global.r, just as the name implies, it's loading libraries and or objects that are literally available to the entire app. So they're globally available instructions that you would put in the global.r. UI.r is just taking that UI object that you previously created, putting it into its own file, and server is just the same way. Shiny reactivity is something that, I mean, I came from like an Excel background, okay? This stuff was complicated to someone like me at first. So I've just, had the luxury of creating now dozens of Shiny apps, mostly small, but some very serious large enterprise Shiny apps. So I feel comfortable with it now. But it didn't make a lot of sense to me, the whole concept of reactivity, because you're really creating like a skeleton or a shell that is super lightweight, and then you're just passing objects or instructions through it. And the whole idea of reactivity, it just takes a few repetitions. But a reactive expression updates a value that is changed by a widget that a user interacts with. The R expression reactive in the Shiny server is another way of creating sort of these objects that update based on some user input or some type of event that happens. So you might want to be observing for an event or a trigger. You could set those kind of instructions in the server, and then whenever that trigger or input changes a value, it will update the reactive object. And by default, any of these inputs, all the inputs you define in your UI.r, such as the input ID here, that's sort of reactive by nature. That's an exception to the whole reactive rule because you don't really need to wrap it in this kind of reactive code. And I wanted to show sort of a real example here because this is just showing you that an input ID can be used. This is more how you would use, how you would take an input from a module and then you would make use of it in your server to then define a reactive object. So I'm only taking a snippet of code from the UI and the server object here, but it's really to show you that everything is wrapped in a reactive function. And now anytime a user changes the region select on the main page, it will impact the industry options object. So it's just sort of like filtering for different things. Okay, and usually I do this at the end, but just to give people a little bit of appreciation who might find Shiny intimidating. I was very intimidated when I started working in Shiny. And the sad embarrassing truth is that the first enterprise Shiny app I had started out as a really small sort of app to show one type of output for one group of people at my company. And then more and more people caught wind of it and saw demos of it. We used, RStudio Connect, now Posit Connect. And so they were able to just navigate to a URL and see this kind of prototype live. And the next thing you know, this 500-line app or so turns into 5,000 lines. And this thing is still in production. Something like Posit Connect makes it easier to kind of save that image with all the appropriate packages and the R version that you need. But still, it's less than ideal to have an enterprise-grade application that's all contained into an app.r. A lot of what I've learned has literally been from Stack Overflow, and lots of great presentations from prior RStudio conferences. There's a lot of companies out there that specialize in sort of Shiny consulting or data science consulting. Epsilon is an excellent example. They just had their Shiny conference this past week, and they have incredible demos that are available for anyone to kind of interact with on their website. And that's just one of many that have just kind of open source these incredible demos to learn from. So I didn't include a slide about this, but this presentation is really meant more to be, how can I take Javier's Shiny app demo, clone it, fork it and clone it, do my own thing with it, and then deploy it to my own Shiny apps URL. That's really what this presentation is meant more to be, so that someone can get an understanding of how to maybe tweak and revise a Shiny app without kind of starting from scratch. I just wanted to pause there. And any questions so far? Okay, this is a good time to give a prize out. Thank you, John. Do we have the bag of the numbers?
Oh, we'll do
we'll do those at the end?
Not at the end.
Okay.
This is were they paying attention question.
Okay, so let's see. First person to answer. What one method of an app design is a singular app.r. What else could you do? What's another approach? Daniel?
Splitting it up with 3 files: UI, global, server.
Okay, wow, there you go. Congratulations.
Engineering.
Yeah, no, that's correct. That's correct, yeah. Okay, so which book is that?
Engineering Production Grade Shiny Apps.
This is an excellent book. Colin Fay, and I forget the other gentleman's name, they wrote this. They are also the authors of the Golem package for R. It is really kind of transformational in terms of the reproducibility of a Shiny app, where the concept is, let's sort of apply a use this style approach of creating a Shiny app or creating new modules for a Shiny app. And it also, they're proponents of like creating a package around your Shiny app for easier reproducibility and deployment. That's sort of advanced, but the book is excellent.
It's a framework, right?
It is, yeah, the Golem framework, yeah. Okay, so GitHub. The first step in this process, if you want to take my app and tweak it to your own liking, you would fork your own copy of my repository. So some of you might have varying levels of experience with GitHub, but the idea of a GitHub fork is that you could fork my kind of live original repository, and by forking it, you create a copy of that on your own user space and repositories, and you can edit that code however you see fit without impacting my original code. After you fork a repo, you can fetch updates from the upstream repo, so if I make updates to my code, you can sort of pull or rebuild your repository from mine so that you always stay kind of up to date with the edits I've made. And once you've actually forked a repository, in GitHub at least, you can also make pull requests. So if there's something that you wish to see in the original repository, you can make a pull request saying, you know, something like, hey, you should use this code instead of this code. So steps to fork the repo. You navigate to the GitHub repository. And it's pretty small, I apologize, but this button right here is the fork button. You would really just smash that, and then it will say, create a new fork. You could change the default settings, but for this example, if you are new to GitHub, I would recommend just keeping the default settings. You hit create fork at the bottom of the screen, and at that point, you should see a new repository on your user account called bslib demo shiny, the same exact name as the repository I had. So that was forking the project repo, and now cloning the project repo. Cloning is the process of taking the source code that is living remotely in the cloud on GitHub and making a local copy of that to your local file system, or maybe you're using a cloud IDE, whatever it might be. It's a way of taking the source code and copying it somewhere else that you can interact with or tweak. If this is all new to you, or you haven't done this, especially with something like the RStudio IDE, Jenny Bryan, she's also at Posit. She and a few others wrote Happy Git and GitHub for the Use R. It is an excellent read. I can't say I've read it end to end, but there are several chapters that I have revisited a million times. One of them is introducing yourself to Git, which at this point is muscle memory. The other is connecting RStudio to Git and GitHub. I won't cover those right now, but great resources, and I'll make this whole presentation available after the
Can I ask a quick question?
event. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to know how many people are comfortable with Git. Like, if you're a Git, intermediate or advanced Git user, can you raise your hand? Okay, cool. I was just curious. Thank you.
You don't get a book for that. You don't get a book for that.
I thought I'd try.
So steps to clone the repo. Navigate to your GitHub repo, or mine if you just want to copy my code and bring it to your environment locally. You click the code button. So on a GitHub repository, oops. Oh. Hold on. Tricks that I learned on a Mac even today. Okay. So in your repo, you just go to code. You can copy this code with SSH keys or HTTPS. And then you just drop that. There's here, I'll continue the presentation because I covered that. So you click on code. You select either the HTTPS or SSH. I would recommend SSH. This Jenny Bryan link will help you set that up. But in the RStudio IDE, I have found this to be sort of the easiest way to clone a new repository. And in fact, we can just, I'll start this process. Oh, great, new update. Okay. So in RStudio, if you go to New Project, it will bring up this new project creation wizard. If you go to version control and then select Git, you can copy the SSH key or HTTPS. I already have this repo, so I'm just going to call it something like copy of bslib demo. And so this is taking all of the files, downloading them, and bringing them into a new project. And there we have it. So I've got all of the source files that were in my repository are now built here. One of the things that this process does when you use the RStudio new project wizard, it creates a .rproj file. So this .rproj file, you can see that I'm in a project right now up here. This is really nice because it assigns this root path as the root path for everything in this functioning project. So if I was to look at, let's say, the location of this, it wouldn't give me my documents folder like it typically does, or whatever that standard working directory is. If I was to do, I think it's just git wd, it would take me directly to this project folder and this project. So it's very nice when working with projects in R. Okay, so I'll go back over here now. And I just showed this thing off. Okay, so editing the Shiny app demo. To your liking, except this time. The structure of the app that we just looked at is something like this. These are all the files and folders that are contained within that R project. The first thing we want to do is to install the R packages that my Shiny app requires. There are several ways of doing this. One of them is just manually installing the packages that you see somewhere in the global.r. So you could, just as easily open up the global.r, look at all of these different packages, and you can tell here that it says packages such and such are not installed. This R project makes use of something called renv, and that's short for reproducible environment. And again, I'm just kind of including all this in this Shiny app because I thought it was a good way for people to learn a lot of different tidbits about the R ecosystem. But renv is a very powerful package that creates a lock file or a snapshot of the package versions that are being used in the R project. So one of the last instructions that I do is I run, when I do have all these packages installed, I run renv snapshot, and that creates a new snapshot into this renv.lock file, and it is just a huge kind of instruction set saying what was the repository, okay, this package named HTML widgets. My app is using version 1.5.4, so that's the version we should install. We should install it from CRAN or whatever RStudio package manager you might be using, either at work or at school. And so it's a very controlled way of ensuring that when other people are reproducing or rebuilding your project or your app, that they are installing the exact versions you were intending them to use. So you can see when we cloned this app, the warning messages, the auto warning messages at the bottom, and I know they're difficult to see, my apologies, but it pretty much says downloading renv 0.17.1, okay, installing renv 0.17.1. So the first thing it does is install renv because it understands that my app or my project is using that system. The next thing it says is use renv : status for more details, or restore. I guess it doesn't say restore. So let's just do what it says here. renv status.
Oh, here. Can you make your font bigger?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Is that better?
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Holding out on us.
So I do exactly as the code says. Use renv status for more details. I executed renv status, and it's saying the following packages are recorded in the lock file but not installed. So all these packages are recorded in the log file. Use renv restore to install these packages. So I'm just going to start this installation process and make sure that it works, but okay, and there we have it. So it's just downloading these. I mean, I'm on a Mac. Windows has the same thing, so it's pulling package binaries, if available, off of CRAN. If you're using the RStudio IDE on Linux or some other distribution that may not have package binaries available on CRAN, the RStudio publicly facing package manager is great, and they have a lot of these packages available for binaries for a bunch of different systems. So, you know, you're literally just copying over that package without having to compile from source code. So I'll let that run in the background, but that's what the rm.log file does. Once that ends, I should have all the packages ready to go to be able to just run my app. And here's a quick example of that. So again, I would just, once these all finish, I could go into the Run App button here, and it will run my Shiny app. So editing the Shiny app. bslib, like I've talked about a few times, it's a package for customizing Bootstrap themes. It introduces Sass variables, and you can use this with both the Shiny runtime on R Markdown as well as Shiny itself. So some of you familiar with R Markdown are familiar with like the YAML headers, or different types of YAML headers where you're like configuring the theme or the styling of the app. This is very similar to that, where there is a function within bslib called bstheme, where I can set the background, foreground color, primary color. I can set the base font or the code font, and there's a bunch of different functions that you could do to like style your app and customize it aesthetically in pretty much in any way you want. Oh, and just to call this out, if you run a bstheme preview, it's a bslib function. It actually does a real-time interactive Shiny app where you can customize a lot of the UI aesthetics, including color. You can make different selections for font, and it's a pretty cool interactive tool if you want to sort of try out different combinations, so that when you go to create your Shiny app and use that same function, you know exactly what the app should look like from at least a color scheme or styling perspective. So yeah, it really, bslib sort of makes app customization a unified or centralized process. Where I have the styling is in the custom_theme.r. So it's under the helpers folder. Is that right? Yeah, helpers custom theme.r. Okay, so it installed 87 packages in 1.8 minutes. Not too bad. Let's just go back real quick, and I'm just going to pick this file here. Let's see if it'll run. Okay, excellent. It runs huge, but if I open it in browser, there you go. Now it's even faster than the version of this app on shinyapps.io. So I'll just close this. And if I go to helpers, custom theme, this is where you can sort of see the functions that I am creating that wrap the bslib theme here. So I'm specifying, when I built this app, it was still Bootstrap version 4 was the default. I believe version 5 is now the default on the bslib package, but I'm just specifying it here for more more clarity. If you have the most updated version of RStudio, the IDE, it's nice that you can, in Tools, Global Options, so Tools, Global Options, Code, Display, you can select Enable Preview of named and hexadecimal colors. It's a nice kind of syntax highlighting option, which in this case, FFFFF, 6 Fs, it represents, it's the hex code for the color white, and you can actually see all the different colors that I'm using here. So it's just a nice little tweak to be able to see colors real time, whether you write them out in words or use hex code.
Do you have to know the CSS classes that you want to change, like if there's custom ones, or is there a limit to what bslib can actually?
I don't think there's a limit for CSS classes,
So
but
if I had like a Shiny app and I wanted to change a particular class, I could investigate that class and then put it in bslib and change it.
oh, I see. If you, so you were trying to like do something that maybe there wasn't already a verb or argument for within, okay. So that's where you would want to style it further with, in this case, like a .scss file. So you can, for most like even the boot swatch themes that come kind of standard with Shiny or are Markdown, like Cosmos or all those, you can further customize those if you
Just add your
incorporate
own
a
custom-
.css file.
Okay.
This is sort of the exact same way. You're just incorporating a .scss file.
Yeah, so you're just creating your custom and overriding their.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Go
I
ahead.
think you just said this, but how did you get it so that they show up and like actually highlighted in that color?
Right here, RStudio IDE Pro Tip.
Okay.
Yeah. So you go to Global Options, Code, Display, and then Enable Preview of named hexadecimal colors.
Thank you.
Yep. And so I was creating this whole custom theme.r. I mean, going back to trying to make a clean sort of app design, I could have put this all within the theme argument of the Shiny navbar page. I mean, I could have just extended my UI.r by, 40 lines or whatever. But I'm just referencing the fn custom theme, which is the function that I'm naming here, and that's just pulling in this entire theme into my UI.r. So when you open the UI.r in this case, it's literally just, 15 lines of code or so. And, I think this comes with time, but you'll notice that the more modular you can have an app to a certain extent, it's much easier to update, in the future. Okay, so for this example, I was taking the Bloomreach app. That's the name of the startup I was interviewing with and worked for a year. I was taking the sort of aesthetics and branding of Bloomreach and trying to see if I could convert it to kind of a retro Apple feel. So these are really the 5 files that you would, if you wanted to do the same thing and tweak it to your own sort of background or portfolio, this is really the only 5 files you would need to update. And you could do this for any brand, any company that's out there. So the first one is revising the custom_theme.r. So in this case, we're taking the base font and tweaking it to something that looks a lot more, retro, really. So it looks almost like something you'd see on an Atari video game. That's the Press Start 2P font from Google. And I don't know, I'll just show this very quickly here, but Google Fonts is an excellent resource for finding new fonts. You could sort by like trending fonts. Yeah, I think by default it's sorted by trending fonts, but you could come in here and pull out a lot of that sort of CSS information. If you go to, like, let's say I want to add this thin Poppins font to my Shiny app, I could come over here and I'm just going to do this Poppins. So import, and there we have it. So there's different ways where you can specify sort of the font family, or just a direct link from Google Fonts, and import them directly into your Shiny app with relative ease. The footer.r is something that you would be adjusting as well. So all these, sorry, getting overwhelmed here with the number of links I got. So all of these helper functions, I put them within the helpers folder because they're really being referenced elsewhere in the code. And in this case, all of these, like the custom theme, the footer, the nav bar, those are all being referenced inside of the UI.r. So the theme, right? This comes from that custom_theme helper file. The nav bar, that comes from the navbar file, navbar.r. The footer, fn footer, that's coming from the helpers footer.r. It's just a nice way of like creating your own shiny functions to keep your code as clean as possible in the UI and the server. So yeah, these are just some edits that I had made to go from that Bloomreach style to the Apple style. The about, like this is a super basic change. If I look at the about page, this is a module. And if you look, I'm just gonna go out a little bit here. If you look at a module, I'm really defining two parts. It's the UI function and then the server function. This is really not doing anything in the server function. It's, I mean, there's nothing to compute. So the about page, where I've got a picture of myself and then I've got a short background, this is all Shiny code and Shiny tags. And you know, this itself, HTML, I think that comes from, yeah, so this comes from the HTML tools package, which is attached when you load the Shiny library. P is another one that just kind of forms a paragraph or like a break. That comes from the same package. This is an example where I'm just, you know, this line here, line 11, that's what I'm suggesting we sort of tweak here to just have it say something like, you know, hi, I'm Steve, I co-founded Apple, life is good. Yeah, so I'll pause there for a moment. Any questions?
You could just write it in HTML too, right? Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. What are you saying?
You could just write it in HTML as well, right?
Yeah, you can just write in HTML as well.
I was wondering if you could show the history of your commands. I was curious what you were doing with the RN package.
Oh, sure. So-
Maybe in the history up in the upper right, or
Oh, right here?
yeah. I don't know if that's okay.
Yep.
Did you create that log file yourself?
No, RN, the package, creates that log file for you.
I see.
Yeah. So if this is, whether it's a Shiny app or some other project, our project that you have, you can create all the infrastructure to be used for RN using the command rn init. So that will initialize the framework that, like when I push this code back into GitHub, or if you were to push this into GitHub, there's actually a git ignore inside of the RN folder. So right now on my working session, I've got library copies that are not already installed on my system that are specific to this this project. I've got those installed here. None of this will actually get pushed back into GitHub because really this whole thing, almost everything here, is being ignored out. So when you push this, and this is all created using that rn init command. After, like, let's say I install, I don't know, someone give me like a off-the-wall R package. Anyone?
High charter?
Which one?
High charter?
Okay, yeah, I'm not using that for sure. So, install.packages
Jeez, so weird.
high charter.
No E.
My chart, oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm installing high charter and its dependencies. right now, RN has actually gotten smart enough where I'm not using this in my code anywhere. So if I was to try and do RN snapshot, it wouldn't actually pick it up. So let's say I wanted to install, or let's say I wanted to actually use HiCharter. Testing example. All right, I'll save this global.r. And now if I was to do rn snapshot, it's going to tell me the following. It's going to say the following packages will be updated in the lock file. So all these packages are going to be updated in the log file. The ones that have asterisks are packages that are not yet in my log file that need to be included in the log file. And then these are coming from, it looks like CRAN. These are coming from the public RStudio package library, which I like to use. So if I was to hit yes, okay, now these changes are stored into my log file. And if we look for, let's say, HiCharter, right? Because I know that wasn't there before. I can go into rn.lock. I can do a search for HiCharter, and there it is. Version 0.9.4, it's coming from CRAN, and these are all the underlying package requirements from it.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. RN is very powerful for whatever type of project you're using, and I think it's also, I hate to call it this, but like a best practice if you are working with other teams that you want to make sure that the code actually runs on their system. This is a good way of doing that. At the very top of the log file, it also tells them what version of R you were using. So if you are using some type of system like Posit Connect or Workbench where you can maintain 10 or 20 different versions of R, this would know to install that image or that instance using that version of R.
Great, thanks a lot.
So the log file is a Python directory or dictionary, right? That's what that looks like.
I think it's JSON.
Is it?
Yeah.
It looks a lot like Conda, those YAML files you create to create
Yeah.
Those are virtual ends. Python has the same thing. It's called a virtual environment.
it's the same thing.
Yeah. A best practice there would be to probably set up a virtual environment for every project that you work on,
Yes.
but I feel like that's less common in Python.
With Python, it's more important to do it because a lot of like OS X uses Python as part of its system library. So if you go like pip install a Python package, you're installing it to your entire system. And what problem is that 6 months from now, when you want to upgrade a package, right, you're trying to update it like system wide, it's gonna break because now you're in this weird state where you can't update because it breaks, but you can't not update, right? So you generally want to constrain your work to be in a virtual environment. And so R says, hey, we need this, and before RM was Packrat, it was the same thing. And you want to keep your projects in this state where, like, 6 months from now, you want to have this thing work. You don't want packages that you've installed along the way to like muck with your project. So RM is like, it's best practice, but it's like almost like you have to. Like it's not. I would not recommend otherwise.
Yes, I concur.
Also, for similar reasons, RN will also snapshot your Python stuff. So whatever Python packages you install inside this, RN will also snapshot.
Way to go, RM.
So if you have a multi-lateral project, it will do both.
Nice.
Thanks.
Good to know.
All right, time for another prize.
We have Mastering Shiny.
Oh, this is another excellent Shiny book written by the Dark
Hadley.
Lord himself, Hadley Wickham.
We have that on video.
Yeah. So,
I'll tweet it one once it's great.
all right, let's see here. So, random question.
Don't ask me to remember that hash.
Yeah. No. I don't know. Let's let me think
Repeat the
about this
hash
for a second.
for-
How about? Okay, we haven't covered this yet, so I'm curious. for the people that use Shiny all the time, you're prohibited from answering this, but you will get another chance to win a prize.
So
For everyone else,
we can't master Shiny.
does anyone know what the www folder is in a Shiny app, or how it can be used? Okay, how about for people that do use Shiny often? Do you know what the www folder does within a Shiny app?
Usually holds images, helpers.
Okay, Marlene gets the prize. All
Yay,
right, so,
I think I already have that.
so
So-
We'll
within,
swap it out, but do you like essential math for data science?
Oh, okay.
great.
Says the math.
So I do talk about this in a little bit, but I'll get to it now. So the www folder is a unique type of file structure within a Shiny project where anything you put in here does not need to be, you don't need the fully qualified file path to access these files. So I can access blr_logo primary.png anywhere in the app just by referencing that file name. Same with the styles.css. So if we go to the navbar function, it's a helper function, navbar, you can see here that the image source on line 5, what's actually, so I'll run the app real quick, the logo on the top left of the app, that is coming from this right here. Oh. Line 5 right here. And you can see that I don't need to write in www/ and then the file name. That's also the case for, the .scss file, which, I don't even get in that in my slides, but the styles.scss, I mean, really what you're seeing here is almost identical to CSS. The only differences are these type of named values that are being defined within the custom theme. So this variable here, border bottom width, if I go to my custom theme, you could see that I'm adding some variables where I'm saying border bottom width is going to have 6 pixels. Border color is going to be primary. What's nice about this is that you could start creating conditionals around your regular R code where primary might be set to something different, whether it's a light or dark theme, but the only thing being referenced in the .scss file or the sassy CSS file is just that named variable. So it's a way of having some interactivity without having to have crazy long, I mean you can't do, I don't think you can do conditional CSS, but it's pretty interesting what you could do there. Yeah.
You can also nest.
John confirmed you cannot.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
You can also nest in Sass files. So traditional CSS, for example, that line 12, you have .navbar, .navbar-nav, and if you had since HTML is nested, you can actually nest in Sass as well, which is kind of nice. And then you can actually have kind of variables for multi-lines. So if you have you can make a set of lines. It's very common when you want to do CSS gradients that have multi-lines, so that you address web, Chrome or Safari, whatever, that are
for the different,
multi-lines. And then you can just reference it with one line, and it's very powerful.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that. Okay, so. All right, so then app deployment using shinyapps.io. If you're just getting started and excited about Shiny and where to deploy, shinyapps.io, it's a hosting solution by Posit. It offers push button deployment from the RStudio IDE. So if you're in any one of those major files where RStudio knows that you're in a Shiny app, or an interactive app like global.r, UI.r, or server.r, you will see that push button deployment button. And all you need to do there is all you need to do there, sorry. Once you hit that button, this is assuming you've set up a Shiny Apps account and also done a one-time link of syncing your RStudio IDE with the Shiny App servers, which is actually very simple. Even within the RStudio IDE, it's very easy to do. Just hitting that blue publish button, this publish to server dialog box comes out, and it's pretty much just asking you what title do you want to use for this app, confirm which account you want to deploy to. You know, I recommended, I think I recommended here, yeah, the Docker file is not something being used for this project, and it's just a text file really. It's not taking up any space, but it's not part of the project, so I recommend unchecking it. And then you just hit publish. Once you hit publish, you'll actually get a deployment window down at the bottom. You'll see a new tab for deploy, and it'll just kind of go through the process of building the image with the package versions you have and the language you have, and then actually deploying that image to Shiny Apps. And then the last thing I'd recommend here, I put it under app deployment, but it's just really cleaning up after yourself with Git. If you have forked the repo, you have a working copy of this code on your repository. I would recommend going ahead and committing those changes. So committing those types of Git changes saves a copy of your changes locally, and then just pushing them will sync the saved commit that you have locally with the remote repository on GitHub or whatever, you know, GitLab or whatever kind of Git platform you were using. And that's it for, we've got one more, Mastering Shiny. Okay. What is the platform where I have deployed my app to, which you can too, for free?
ShinyApps.io.
Luke is the winner, shinyapps.io.
Shiny Master.
And then in terms of resources, there are so many beginner resources, it's almost dizzying. I think one of the best places to start is the official Shiny webpage on the rstudio.com site. You know, I referenced this earlier, but the Getting Started guide on Shiny Apps, as well as, I think this is the official Getting Started guide on Shiny Apps. And then some extension packages. The thing about these extension packages that I really like is that out of the box, you've got a very professional sort of dashboard feel or layout, as opposed to something that looks just like, you know, here, I'm just going to close this project real fast. I'm not going to save. Looks like I need to update. So, yeah, I think this app right here,
The
this app
super
doesn't do anything.
blase, piecemeal.
Yeah,
put
it's
together
just, it looks,
dashboard.
again, like something that maybe an Atari would have, you know, visualized back in the day. So something, oh,
What ChatGPT creates.
I mean, just for some coding, it's pretty blase. And it's only
What,
right about
ChatGPT?
half the time, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very confident system.
you know what, I'll call this app.r. And I'm gonna, okay, so it's named app.r. Shiny knows, or RStudio knows, hey, this is an app. I can run this app. And so, I mean, believe it or not, most of the corporate dashboards I see are exactly like this. I mean, you know, there's more information on them, but they do a lot for the user in terms of being able to iterate and see updates about something they're analyzing or, you know, researching, but it's not a great way of winning people over to a platform like Shiny. Whereas, out of the box, BS4 dash. There's a demo. BS4 dash gallery. I mean, you've got a wake screen, so that's the first major improvement. There's a lot going on in this demo app, but it is a nice little. Haven't used it in a while. I don't know what's happening.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yeah, Dave.
Javier, so I send a lot of the department heads, I send them HTML workbooks coming off of Flex dashboards. They can click around in it, and, you know, they can see it on their own computer.
Yeah.
Would I be
And
able
you
to?
send it as a .html file?
Yes.
Right.
And would I be able to send them something like this, or?
If they had RStudio on their computer, you could send them a project repo.
Okay.
If you wanted like authentication and whatnot, where someone would just navigate to a URL and be able to access a Shiny app securely,
Yeah.
there are cheap options out there. You might even have someone kind of like, you know, bake something for you at work if you have that option, like where they could throw some kind of like VM at you and you set up Docker or something. Like there are ways to do this really cheaply, but yeah, that's the main difference there is too that like the entire data that you would be using or reviewing or splicing and dicing within something like a Flex dashboard as a .html file,
Right.
it's blown up in size because the entirety of the data is there.
Right. Right.
Whereas, you know, Shiny code is often like several kilobytes. I mean, we're just talking about, you know, text effectively, where the Shiny app itself is super lightweight, but it's the data objects that you pass through it, maybe from like S3 or, you know, Google Drive or some other kind of like BigQuery. Like it's the data objects that are really the size, whereas when you're passing in .html, everything needs to be contained within that object.
Right.
Yeah. But shinyapps.io, they give you,
You can include a Shiny app inside of an HTML file from Corda if you do it as self-contained.
Right.
Right. Yeah, like
Yeah.
using the runtime Shiny, I think, within an R Markdown or Corda. I've actually used Flex Dashboard before. I've never used the runtime Shiny with Flex Dashboard. But yeah, pricing is pretty good. I mean, even the free tier gives you 5 applications. It gives you 25 active hours. So if it's a small team, this is not a bad way to go. It doesn't have authentication.
Okay.
I don't think it has authentication. But anyway, yeah, there's a few different platforms, like Shiny Proxy, AWS. There's a bunch of different platforms where you can sort of deploy these two relatively cost-effective, in a relatively cost-effective way. Yeah.
That's the aftermarket.
Yeah. I mean, it's late enough for
Yeah, I think got some advanced resources on here. Golem for modularizing and packaging Shiny apps. The Mastering Shiny book by Hadley Wickham. I actually think it's an excellent, yeah, I think that's an excellent book. It's a bit, I mean, again, I hate going back to this, but like, I'm a guy that got into this who came into it from, you know, an Excel background. Not to discredit Excel, but this book very much feels like a, you know, professional CS heavy kind of like dictionary of the world of Shiny. I reference it when I have very specific problems that I'm trying to troubleshoot, but in general, just like Stack Overflow or other people's tutorials have gotten me pretty far.
Or the SoCal rug Slack.
Oh yeah, Southern California R user group
So
Slack
many
is
Slack
pretty good
channels.
too. The sub channels are there, yeah.
People have happily to hop on.
And then yeah, so this is a presentation. I'll make it available. I have a blog post that I wrote. Oops, that's not the blog post. What's that? I wrote a blog post in November 2020 where I pretty much cover exactly what we just went through today. So you could also do this at your own pace. I tried to, explain in detail in a way where someone that's not very familiar with Shiny could still sort of collect or clone that information and then tweak the app in their own liking, or to their own liking, and still be able to push something back out. But yeah, that's it. So, thank you all.